Hi, everybody. The numbers have started to settle now, so I'm going to get started with today's live Q&A webinar. My name's Ros Williams, and I'm also joined by Helen Kennedy. I am the Associate Director, and Helen is the Director of the ESRC Digital Good Network, and it's a pleasure to have you guys here with us today. Today, we're going to be running through some of the schemes that we're launching this year and giving you guys an opportunity to ask questions. And just so everybody's aware, and you'll have been notified in advance on email, this webinar will be recorded so you can look back and play it. We are also welcoming questions through the Q&A function on Zoom today. So if you have them, you can ask your question. You can either name yourself, or if you wish to, you can ask your question anonymously. So we thought, just to get started, we would offer a bit of an insight into the schemes that we are running this year. Next slide, please. This Q&A session, however, is designed to accompany a pre-recorded webinar that you can access and scan that QR code to do so. You're welcome to watch that at any time as you wish. That will give a more thorough insight into the schemes that we're launching this year. As I say, this particular Q&A event is really to give you an opportunity to ask questions about those schemes, but it will be useful, I think, just to run through what those schemes are very briefly before we get started with the Q&A. So the next slide, please. So we're launching 3 different schemes this year. The first one is the follow-on from last year's Digital Good Research Fund. This year's call, the 2024 call, is about evaluating the digital good rather than the foundations of the digital good. We'll talk a little bit about that. We're also launching our Digital Good Network Fellowship Scheme and our Summer School for 2024. So the Digital Good Research Fund, the 2024 call, is about evaluating the digital good. As I said, this moves on from the previous year's call, which was about the foundations of the digital good. And this year, we're inviting proposals that do a range of different things. You might be exploring whether and how the digital good could be evaluated. We're also asking you to think about the different kinds of technologies, contexts, and domains in which we might evaluate the digital good. We're keen also to consider the role of different kinds of communities, sectors, and organizations in the pursuit of evaluating this digital good. And we're very keen to test different kinds of methodological innovations for that evaluation. We are, as ever, asking teams to be interdisciplinary. We're also keen to promote early career research and leadership, and we want to connect with communities and organizations external to academia. Next slide, please. The Research Fund will be dedicating up to £450,000 to fund applications in response to the call, and we're going to be looking to fund multiple projects, anywhere between £20,000 to £50,000. Do bear in mind, of course, that this is UCRI funded work, and so we will be operating generally at the rule of 80% FEC. So if you have any questions about that, you can ask that today. Your research officers at institutions will also be able to offer some guidance on what that means, and we have further information on our website. The deadline for applications is in the spring, the 25th of April of this year at 4 p.m. That's in UK time. And we're also going to be hopefully supporting applicants as well through a range of different initiatives. The first of these initiatives is a computational methods webinar. So this is an area where we're keen to invite applications, computational methods. So if you are somebody with a background in that who'd like to think a little bit more about how you might apply that to questions of the digital good, one of our colleagues, Scott, will be offering a webinar on this. We also will have a pre-submission sandpit. You will need to apply to attend that sandpit. And the purpose of that is to connect different applicants together around ideas that they may have. And we'll also be doing some work to help you to germinate those ideas too. And we'll also be featuring an early career researcher support webinar, which will feature a bit of insight as well from Lexi Webster, who is a recent success of last year's Digital Good Research Fund. If you've got any more questions about that, of course, you can ask those today, but a great deal of the information is also available on our fantastic website at digitalgood.net. We are this year as well launching the Digital Good Fellowship Scheme, which is a really exciting and new opportunity that we didn't run last year. This is to offer up to £20,000 for research activities that explore these questions that are germane to our network, what a good digital society looks like. This would include a short-term residency in one of the institutions associated with the ESRC Digital Good Network. And you can find out what those institutions are, again, by going on our website and finding out. And these are to be funded between September 2024 and June 2026. So there's a substantial window of time in which somebody could undertake one of these fellowships. What we're keen to do, of course, is to engage people beyond their standard disciplinary or sectoral home. So hopefully you'd be crossing different kinds of dimensions in your work in so doing a fellowship. One of the things that we're experimenting with this year is some ring fencing. And the purpose for that is because of our internationalization policy and our statement, which you can read on the website that we run. Digital Good from the South is an initiative to ring fence 50% of the funds of this scheme to be awarded to applicants who are either based in the Global South or whose proposed activities will take place in or that are about the Global South. If you have any questions about what constitutes this obviously quite problematic term, Global South, we do go into that in some detail on the website. We're thinking here in terms of a list of countries to which you must be able to say you're attached to be able to apply for that scheme. If you're interested in more details on that, of course, you can ask about that today, but the information on the website is very thorough. We're keen, though, to invite people who are not just from universities, but come from beyond universities, who might work in policy, industry, or other kinds of civil society organisations. And we absolutely respect that not everybody can have, per se, a buyout to undertake this work. So we're keen to work with people to enable them to do this. It is quite an unusual application process, however. First of all, we're going to invite expressions of interest, and that will be managed by our local team, who will be able to assist you in communicating with Digital Good team members to figure out where you might be best placed to do a fellowship and to figure out whether that would be something that one of our team members would be willing and able to support. And that expression of interest, which you can learn more about on the website, is due by Tuesday, the 30th of April of this year. The formal application, which is another piece of administration, after the point where you've expressed your interest and secured a place with one of the institutions attached to this network, is then in the summer. It's the 28th of June. We're going to be running a webinar with John, who's another one of our colleagues in the network, the Digital Good from the South webinar, and that will be in the spring. And find out more details about that on our website. And then finally, we want to talk about our summer school. The summer school is a PhD opportunity, and we ran one last year. It was really successful, and we're really excited to run one again this year. And it will take place in June from the 24th to the 26th in Sheffield. The Digital Good Network Summer School is an opportunity that is fully funded, which is obviously quite rare in these contexts. And so that makes it quite competitive. We get lots of applications last year, and we're anticipating lots again this year. But it's an opportunity for PhD researchers who've passed their confirmation review, who are into their second year, to engage with a range of different kinds of development topics relating to the digital good. We're going to fund a minimum of 18 places for UK-based PhD students. And again, in line with our internationalisation statement and our commitments to that, we're also going to fund a minimum of 2 places for PhD students who are studying at universities based in the Global South. Again, the same caveats as mentioned earlier around that term. The website features a blog from Charlene, who was one of our fantastic PhD students who came along last year, and you can read more about that there, or you can access that just through our website as well. Just the next slide, thank you. There's going to be a very short window for these applications. There are multiple reasons for that, partly because of our internationalization focus and the concern around making sure that students are able to access visas, that we have about 2 weeks of an application window, and that will open on the 1st of February. It will then close on the 15th of February, and you can find out more details about that on our website along with the application form. So individual scheme pages exist for all of these different schemes. You can have a look more on the digitalgood.net website. And of course, if you want more information on that, we're going to have this conversation, this Q&A now. You can also email our colleague Ruth, who manages our info@digitalgood.net email address, who will be able to help you with any specific questions you may have, although hopefully we'll cover a great deal of those today. And as ever, we invite you to sign up for our mailing list, which will provide specific information on the different kinds of webinars that we've mentioned over the last few moments there. So thank you very much indeed for listening. And good luck with your applications. We'll now open the floor to questions, and I can see that we've already got some starting to come in on the Q&A. And Helen Kennedy, who is the director of the Digital Good Network, is joining me, and together we hope to answer some of those questions for you today. So I'm just going to open the Q&A now. So look here.
Do you want me to have a go at the first one, Ros, because I've had time to read them while you've been
that's a lovely idea, Helen. Thank you very much. You go for it.
Okay, so the first question is about what view we take on investigators costing their time in. And there's a note there saying that universities expect PIs to cost themselves, but on the website we say it's optional. Would costing in their time disadvantage the application? So in terms of that final question, does costing your time disadvantage the application? The answer is no. I think of the 9 projects that we are currently funding in the first round of the Digital Good Research Fund scheme, all investigators have costed their time. So it doesn't disadvantage you. I guess it depends on what the priorities are for your project, and if there isn't enough money to go around everything that you would want to cost, what would you cut? Some of us are privileged enough to be at institutions where part of our working week is ring fenced for research. So we may choose to use some of that time to spend on a Digital Good Research Fund project to enable to include other people in the project who need to be costed because they don't have that privilege or that access to other funded research time. So it definitely doesn't disadvantage an application. It's a really modest pot of money, up to £50,000. So you need to prioritise, and it may be that you need to think about whether to cost your own time or not.
Thanks, Helen. I can see a couple of questions that are coming in about the fellowship scheme, and I'll take an answer. I'll take a punt at answering those. Helen, could I ask you just to direct your attention to a couple of questions toward the bottom from Sophia Knight at Demos that we can come to shortly? The questions here about the fellowship scheme, somebody was asking about whether Denise was asking about whether we're able to offer assistance for the expression of interest. Basically, what we're hoping to do here is facilitate connections with different members of our core team. So the idea here is that you would be based at one of the institutions or one of the organizations that is attached to the Digital Good Network, and you do that for a period of time. With the expression of interest, what we're hoping to do is to facilitate that initial connection. And then with that core team member, they will support you in the sense that they will give you guidance on what they think will be successful, and in the sense that they can give you guidance on how they might be able to work with you in your fellowship period. They will support you to put together the full application form, although it will be sort of your responsibility to undertake that. In terms of assistance for the expression of interest, what we'd encourage you to do is offer as much detail as possible, and then begin those conversations as early as possible so that you can think about who it would be in the core team that might be a suitable person for you to partner with for that fellowship. So we are looking to offer support. We are looking to offer support for people with that application process if it's deemed appropriate after that expression of interest phase, if that makes sense. It's quite an unusual process that we're going through, and we're experimenting with it. So any feedback on it will, of course, be gratefully received, Denise. Katie here is asking as well about the opportunity. Is funding available for people who want to work in the US or the UK for a period of time as part of their work? Katie, I'm not sure whether you're specifically asking there about the fellowship scheme or about something else, but I see at the end of your question you're asking about getting support basically to fund your PhD research, which may well fall into the remit of the Digital Good Network's interest area. What we're not doing is funding people to undertake PhDs here. What we are hoping to be able to do is support people through the Digital Good Research Fund to do discrete pieces of research that may overlap with one of our 3 focus areas, which are sustainability, equity, and resilience. What we're not doing, as I say, though, is funding PhDs. So if you're actually applying as a PhD student, the only scheme really that would be eligible for you would be our summer school for you to be able to attend and be a PhD student. We do find that some people apply to the Digital Good Research Fund who don't have a PhD, who aren't active in academia, and they may be one of the co-Is are on a Digital Good Research Fund application. But it sounds, Katie, as though you're looking for some support there for a PhD studentship, which isn't actually something that we're supporting at the moment. I hope that answers your question. Somebody has asked here about the applications for the fellowships and whether you have to be employed by a UK university. No, absolutely not. The intention of this scheme is basically, certainly with the Global South portion of that, is to ensure that we're getting a mixture of applicants from across the world applying for this fellowship scheme. Our intention here is that some of that funding, it may go to people in the UK, but the main intention here is that we're supporting the travel of people across different kinds of sectors and disciplines here. So the main focus here is that you're moving to work in your fellowship with somebody who's without your sectoral or your disciplinary home. And that is kind of the main criterion of success here, that you can convince in your application that that's something that the fellowship would allow you to do successfully. Helen, did you want to come in there or answer Sophia's questions?
Yeah, I can answer Sophia's questions. I thought I might loop back to the question from the PhD candidate as well, briefly. And I might ask our network manager, Ruth, to come in on this one as well. So you note either from our website or from what Ros said that there is a focus on interdisciplinary teams applying to the Digital Good Research Fund. And that is in part the remit that we are required to fulfill by the funder. So the funder put out a call and the funder said, we want a network that will do this. And one of the things that the funder wanted was for the network to build expertise in interdisciplinary working. So usually the Digital Good Research Fund applications are these interdisciplinary teams. Ruth, can you advise on whether PhD students can be members of teams as in a research assistant? Are they eligible for that or not?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. This was actually one of the FAQs that came up last year because people were asking about it. So I'll actually find the exact advice that we gave. And let me just find it for you. Okay, so it was that PhD students can't be named applicants. So they cannot be a PI and they cannot be a co-I. They can act as research assistants if research assistant hours are costed into the proposed project. And there's a bit more guidance about the amount of time that single PhD students can dedicate is determined by the guidelines of the PhD students university to ensure that the PhD research doesn't suffer because of other things that students are doing. But yeah, essentially they can't be named applicants, but they can be research assistants as part of a team.
Brilliant, thanks, Ruth. And it's probably also worth pointing out that we are guided by our funder, UCRI, in terms of conditions like this. So we need to comply with UCRI's terms when it comes to who's eligible to apply for funding. So we're applying those terms here. So I'll turn now to the questions that Sophia asked. So hi, Sophia, thanks very much for coming along. Great to have you and others here. So the first question is asking us, which of the stakeholder groups who we identify are we as wanting to engage with, are we prioritizing in our engagement now? And are there any stakeholder groups that we have had less success in reaching? And as Sophia highlights, in one of our objectives is to engage with policy, industry, practitioners, communities, and civil society. So one of the ways that we're doing that in the Digital Good Network in general is by having management team members, co-investigators who are engagement co-Is who are based in those sectors. So Rima Patel is our policy engagement co-investigator, links us to policy and also has links to civil society. Rima helped to set up the Ada Lovelace Institute and also has other experience in relevant fields. In terms of industry and practitioner, we have Ria Jones, who works for BBC R&D, and we have Claire McCallum, who works for Zinc VC, which supports kind of social good venture capital. So they link us in to industry and practitioners. And in terms of communities, we have Sarah Wajid, who is one of the CEOs of Birmingham Museums Trust, which is a very, very kind of community-oriented cluster of museums. So they serve as kind of connectors to those different stakeholder groups across all of the activities that we do. We've got representatives from those groups on our College of Experts. Some of us are doing some of our own research as well, and so through some of that research where some of us are connecting to people from those stakeholder groups. The 9 Digital Good Research Fund projects that we're currently funding were also required to do some engagement, and so they're all engaging in one way or another with people from those groups. The question about whether we have less success reaching some groups than others, I'm going to answer with a gut feeling, not based on having analysed any data or anything, so please don't hold me to this. Ruth probably will go away and analyse some data and come up with a more accurate answer. My sense is that the funded projects are connecting us really well to communities at the moment, and so we've got really great kind of diverse community voices being heard in this work of defining what it means to talk about the digital good. We've got things lined up in terms of sort of policy and industry and practitioner engagement, doing a bit less of that at the moment, getting a bit of the sort of foundational research done initially. I would also point out, and I think this might be a third question about engagement, is we're going to produce something that we call the Digital Good Index, which we see as a tool for organisations that are developing or deploying technologies to reflect on whether those technologies will have socially good outcomes. We're going to iterate the Digital Good Index. We hope to launch the first version in the autumn this year, which this may well be kind of a set of challenges or a set of provocations. So we're kind of working towards this index in which we absolutely do not want to reduce and simplify the massive challenge of achieving the digital good or defining what a good digital society is. It may be principle-based. It may be a set of principles for working towards the digital good. And we hope that this will be used across the different stakeholder groups. I don't know whether anyone in the audience is thinking, wow, those guys have really set themselves tons of massive / virtually impossible challenges. It can feel a little bit like that from inside the Digital Good Network at times. You know, we've got all these technologies, all these domains of deployment, trying to see if we can abstract a set of principles by which we might all kind of collectively work towards a better digital society. And what I tend to say is, well, the journey matters as well as the destination, but that's what we're doing in that regard. And I think there was a final question about the showcase events, which is say more about it, where was it, who attended, and what's happening next. So something to point out here is that another thing that is in our remit is to build a network. That's what the funders wanted us to do. So we just had our first event a couple of weeks ago. It was based in Sheffield, and its aim was to bring together people that are already involved in the Digital Good Network. So that's funded projects, interns, core team, some of our College of Experts. So there's about 55 people present at it. It wasn't widely open, apart from a couple of bits of it, an introductory talk by me and a keynote talk by Charlton McElwain. I'm thinking that maybe we shouldn't be calling it a showcase event, maybe we should be calling it a networking event, and that we should be scheduling some sort of separate showcase events that are targeted at those stakeholder groups that we talked about there. So this is something I think that we might kind of tweak and refine our terminology and our use of. In terms of which stakeholder groups were in attendance, probably the reverse of what I said about who were engaging. Nobody brought in the communities that they're working with. Maybe we could say that for 1 or 2 organisations, that they were kind of representing communities. We had good representation from industry, actually. and some civil society and policy representation there, largely in the form of our College of Experts, of which I think about 10 people joined at one point or another, which was really promising to us that, that these people actively spent some time coming to Sheffield or joining us remotely online to find out what we're doing. It might be worth throwing in there that we hope to have a face-to-face launch of the Digital Good Index in the autumn. That may well take place in London. We haven't fully confirmed that yet. So that was a huge answer to quite a lot of questions, but really happy to say more if that didn't cover everything. I'll hand it over to you, Ros, but I'll come back in a minute to give you a break.
Thank you, Helen. Yes, we've got a really heartening question here that comes from an anonymous attendee. It's a question about the Digital Good Research Fund, but it's more broadly about the network. This questioner says, a lot of discussion about the digital good has felt very geared towards quantitative work. To what extent would qualitative applications be welcome? We certainly do welcome qualitative applications, and we're keen to support people with qualitative work. One of the things that we've found as well is that actually what we're supporting is a lot of qualitative work, because one of the challenges we've set ourselves is to be interdisciplinary, and by that we mean moving beyond the kind of the home disciplines of the social sciences towards social sciences like psychology, but other kinds of disciplines as well, like computational social science or even just computer science. One of the things that we want to try and do is actually encourage more quantitative work that we're funding. And one of our key areas of focus here is computational methodologies. And one of the key things that we're looking to do is support applicants in putting together applications that feature those kinds of methods. So really what we're focusing on here is, of course, encouraging really high quality applications across a range of different methods. Absolutely, we're sure that many of them will be qualitative, and we really welcome those kinds of applications. But really, as part of our kind of drive towards interdisciplinary work, we certainly encourage people who are not using qualitative methods or who are using mixed methods or kind of methods that perhaps we haven't even thought of yet. Because of course, one of the things we're keen to think about here is methodological innovation for evaluating the digital good. And we're really hoping to encourage those kinds of applicants as well. And it may be that divide of qualitative and quantitative work is perhaps not quite right to describe some of the research that hopefully we'll get applications for in this round. So yes, please do consider bringing along all of your methodological expertise to any applications that you put in. We've got another couple of questions about the fellowship scheme. Somebody here asking about how many we're going to fund, and another person asking about whether which universities basically will host fellows. The first thing to know is that we have about 10 people on the core team who are able to host a fellowship during the period of time that this scheme is going to be live for. If you want to know who those people are and where they're based, the easiest way for you to do that is to go to our opportunities page on digitalgood.net, go to fellowships, scroll down to the bottom, and you will see a bullet pointed list of the folks who can host a fellow and where they are based. Now, that list is basically to give you a sense of who would be open to having a fellow. It isn't to say that we'll be able to fund 10 fellowships. What we have put aside is a relatively modest amount of money, again, to try and support people to do these fellowships. So we've got about £100,000 aside for this, and we're hoping to fund people to do fellowships up to £20,000. So of course, if we had 5 really strong fellowships that were all costed at £20,000, we'd only be able to fund 5 of them. What that does mean is that if we did get fellowships that were costed at a smaller amount, we might be able to fund more of them. It's absolutely not to say that we will prioritize those that sort of underfund themselves and undercost themselves. That's not at all what we're encouraging. We will fund the right mix of fellowships and the kind of the right focus, a mix of focuses. And the focus on how you cost it will not be the primary way that we judge applications. Although, of course, value for money is always a criterion in how we in how we review applications. So we can't offer a specific figure on how many we will fund. It's probably not going to be much more than between 5 and 10, and we do have a discrete set of money that we can fund that we can spend on this. So hopefully that answers that question, and it begins to answer the other question, which is where can I actually do this fellowship? Well, it's at one of those institutions with one of those individuals. And that's the way that you can kind of figure out where you want to direct your expression of interest, is by looking at that list, exploring that person and that institution and thinking, would that be a good fit for me, basically, and starting to think about an expression of interest, which would, as the information on the webpage explains, require you to put together a sort of a set of details about what you would do with the fellowship, and then we can sort of broker your contact with those individuals. What it doesn't mean is that we can fund fellowships at basically any institution. So somebody here, I think, who's let's have a look here. Maria Garcia, I think her name was asking whether somebody who's based in Mexico will be able to do a fellowship somewhere in the US. I think that was the gist of the question, Maria. No, it wouldn't quite work like that. We have one core team member who's based in the US. If it was appropriate for your research, you could apply to do a fellowship like that. Another way to engage with the Digital Good Network as somebody who's based in Mexico is also to think about applying for the fellowship, but with somebody else who's in our core team outside of the US, or indeed to work with a UK-based research organisation and think about applying for the Digital Good Research Fund. We're really keen to engage people from different parts of the world in our network as far as we are able to, and within the kind of the permitted confines of UCRI funding, and we're keen to do that. So please do look at these schemes and think if there's any kind of way you can engage with us. Somebody else also asked whether there was any value in getting in touch with people ahead of the expression of interest phase. I would say that there isn't necessarily any value in doing that, because people will wait until we've had all of the expressions of interest in to decide what they've got capacity to support, essentially through to application stage. You may have already met somebody who's in the core team and already have had a conversation with them. That's fine. What that won't do is sort of up your chances of getting funded, essentially, because our review process is very it's very strong. The people who are involved in supporting you with an application will then not be able to review your application. So we have lots of checks and balances in place to make sure there are no conflicts of interest, and to ensure that those who don't have those pre-existing connections, or indeed that might not have that confidence to reach out ahead of time, also get a strong chance to apply for the funds and have the same chance of success as everybody else. I do hope that makes sense. Just having a look here through some of our other questions.
Will I jump in, Ros, with an answer to one?
Yeah, of course, go for it, Helen.
Yeah, so there's one question from an anonymous attendee which asks, is it possible for early career researchers on temporary or short-term contracts to apply as a COI or a PI for the Digital Good Research Fund? Ruth can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think this depends on your own local institution. You would need your institution to agree to support you to be employed by it for the duration of the project. And that can often be done by them submitting a letter when you submit your application form. And institutions themselves vary in terms of whether they will or won't do that. Ours does, others don't. So you would need to talk to your own institution about that. I mean, I would pick off some other ones, but I don't know what the priorities are. I need Ruth or somebody to nudge me about which ones to answer. Have you got any lined up there, Ros, that you think you can answer?
Yes, we've not really answered any about the PhD summer school yet. And I see somebody's asking about the Digital Good Network summer school and whether it's accepting people from, say, Europe, for example, to apply, or if it's just people based in the UK or in the global south who are listed on the website. And that is correct. What we're going to be doing is accepting applications from people who are based at UK universities. You don't have to be a British citizen, but you do have to be based at a UK university, or you have to be enrolled at a university in one of the countries on that list. And the reasons for that are basically that this is UCRI funding, so it's funding from the UK government. And so one of our priority areas is boosting social science skill sets in the UK to focus to answer questions around the digital good. And of course, the focus on internationalization. If you were to read our internationalization statement, we're really keen to ensure that resources and opportunities are flowing to individuals in countries where they might otherwise not be able to access some of these opportunities. And so far, I think we're starting to do that. For example, with the Digital Good Research Fund, we had colleagues who joined us from South America and from South Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa joining us for our January showcase as well. So we are starting to see some of the fruits of that labour, and that is very much one of our priority areas at the moment. That said, there are other opportunities to involve with the digital good to get involved with the digital good network. If you are in Europe, we have lots of events on, so please do feel free to come to those. Signing up to our mailing list as well will give you a sense of the different kinds of opportunities that we can support with as well. What it doesn't do is preclude you from being involved in the Digital Good Research Fund. If you're a European researcher, then you could be listed as, for example, a co-I in that. In line with the international investigator policy that's linked to on our Digital Good Network website. I'm not very good here at answering questions and also looking at them, Helen, so I'm not sure if you've had a chance.
I'm good. So the second half of Cindy M's question, the first half was about, is it worth getting in touch about an expression of interest? The second half is saying, is there any match funding expected from our universities for the fellowship scheme? The simple answer to that is no, there is no expectation of match funding. I'm zooming down to the bottom question by an anonymous attendee, because this is also about what funding is covered. And this says, I'm interested in the fellowship. I live in one of the global south countries. Would I have to relocate to the host institution, and what would the cost of that be considered? So yes, the expectation is of some global travel to connect us, to ensure that the global north witnesses and pays attention to and learns from the expertise from the global south. That's part of that kind of ring fencing aim there. So yes, there would be expectation of some travel, and yes, it is costed in, both travel and subsistence for people who come from a country with a salary in a country that wouldn't cover the cost of living in a more expensive global north country. So I'm zooming back up to the top again. Maggie Grayson has asked some questions about funding travel costs for remote external experts. Do we do it? So if you're proposing a project which involves some consultation with remote external experts, and you want to bring them together as part of the project that you are proposing to enable you to meet the aims of the project that you're proposing, then you would need to justify that within the project as a sort of important project cost. Again, Ruth can correct me if I'm wrong about this. There wouldn't necessarily be a limit, but we have to look at value for money. And if of the £50,000, 40,000 of it was spent on bringing remote external experts and there wasn't much left for anything else, we might have a question about whether that's a good use of the money, whether it all needs to be spent in that way. So Maggie's final question is about, I'm looking for info about fellowships and the projects too. My answers are more about the Digital Good Research Fund there, because the fellowship money isn't really for that. The fellowship money you apply to be a fellow, and you apply to be a fellow at one of the 10 host institutions that Ros mentioned before. I'm aware that there was a final question from Sophia. Sorry, go on, Ros.
Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to come back in on something that you were talking about in relation to Maggie's question when she was asking about limits. So if Maggie was asking about limits for international partners, I just thought it was worth flagging that for the Digital Good Research Fund, there is a limit to the amount that can be given to international partners. And I believe it's about 30%. I'm just finding the right page.
That's right, yeah.
So international co-investigators and UK business, third sector and government body co-investigators should not exceed 30% of the overall cost of the grant at 100% FEC. And that's because obviously some people are able to get costs at 100% FEC, full economic cost, rather than the 80%, but that cannot exceed 30% of the overall cost of the research fund. So I just wanted to flag that.
Brilliant. Yes, thank you very much for reminding us of that, Ruth. And that is, again, is in line with UCRI's overarching policies about international collaboration. So yes, really helpful. Thank you. So if it's okay, I will now go. I'm really happy to see that there are fewer questions because it's easier to read them when there are less. So I'm going to go back to Sophia's question about how are we defining and measuring the impact of the Digital Good Network? How are you hoping that resources produced will be used and by which stakeholders? So that first question, there's a massive answer to that. We have a monitoring and evaluation document. It is 15 pages long, in which we list activities, we list outputs, we list desired outcomes, and we list hoped for impacts. It's quite a long list. We want the digital good to be on the agenda of researchers, practitioners, policymakers, publics. We want decision making, to think about the digital good. In some cases, we'd like to see policy change. We'd like to see increased public debate. We'd like to see stakeholders better able to evaluate the goodness of digital technologies. We'd like increased pressure on policymakers and practitioners to deliver the digital good, and other impacts as well. I think that I can't really go through the whole list because there's a sort of a limited amount of time. And then the question was about how would we like to see the digital good index being used? Was it about being used? It's been moved to the answered pile now, or was it about kind of
who we would hope to be able to use it and key stakeholders?
Yeah. So I think that the answer to that is they would fall within those categories of stakeholders that you clearly identified, Sophia, and listed from our website. And it's really important for us to be responsive to those organisations or stakeholders that are interested in working with us. So I would say we won't be hammering on closed doors of global tech companies that don't want to listen. But if there's a partially open door of a global tech company that does want to listen, then we'll push it a bit further open and have a conversation with them. So we have existing connections, and a lot of us are pretty experienced researchers and done quite a lot of impact and engagement work. So we're kind of capitalizing on them. Always interested in building new relationships with stakeholders. So Sophia, if Demos are interested, please do get in touch with us after this event, and we would love to have a further conversation with you. So yeah, I don't know, Ros, have you got anything to add to those answers?
No, but I can go at some of these other questions if that's all right with you, Helen. Great. So the first question I'm going to take, I've got a list of 4 questions here that may be added to in the time I'm speaking, but I'll start to work my way through them. They're all from anonymous folks who are joining us, and welcome. Thank you for your questions. Somebody here has asked for the Digital Good Research Fund, whether it's possible to cost in an event such as a workshop. For example, they ask to engage with charities or practitioners. The answer to this question, as you might suspect, is it depends on whether it is helpful in you achieving the objectives and the aims of your research, and then whether that research helps us in achieving the objectives and aims of the fund. So if a workshop looks like it makes sense in the intellectual context of what you're trying to do, then absolutely. You would, as ever, need to justify that in the costing, in the justifications for costings part of the form. And for those listening, it may well be worth just sort of downloading that form and having a look at it if you've not engaged with this process before, because it's there are multiple boxes and we do ask for lots of information. So yes, you absolutely could run one as long as it was coherent and it made sense. I'm going to jump down to another question, which I think sort of maps probably has a similar answer, which is that it's asking whether for a US researcher proposing to visit a UK network member under the fellowship scheme, would it support or undermine their chances to identify opportunities to collaborate with additional researchers in the UK, as in beyond that core team or beyond that individual, that institution? Again, entirely depends, I would say, on whether what you're doing is going to further some of the goals that the fellowship scheme has, which is in part about capacity building for yourself, but also about kind of furthering the ambitions of the network. So if this allows you to build those networks further out in a way that would be advantageous to the digital good network, so that we could start to think more about these questions of what constitutes a digital good society and how we get there, then that would make absolute sense. And indeed, it could make sense in the context of kind of value for money. What's the purpose of coming over from the US, as well as to meet with this particular colleague who's your kind of your fellowship host? There may be other kinds of networks to build, and indeed drawing in that core team colleague into those networks could well be something that makes a lot of sense as well. So there's not necessarily anything that needs to be taken off the table here. Ruth will, of course, disagree. There are things that we certainly cannot fund, but one of the things we do want to do is support people to build networks. And if you're willing to help us to do that, then absolutely that would make sense. But it does have to be coherent within the broader repertoire of activities that you're proposing to do with the fellowship. We've got another question here related to the Digital Good Research Fund, and it's asking us here whether we can fund pilot research. So the question is, considering this is focused on evaluating the digital good, am I right in assuming that no exploratory or pilot research will be appropriate, but is it more basically about evaluating existing stuff? Existing initiatives? No, you're not right in that assumption. We're really, really keen to support people to explore new ways of undertaking research and different kinds of foci of research beyond research that's already happening. What this isn't is basically funding people to do evaluation work. That's not what we're looking to do here. We're asking people to think critically about this question of whether, how, and and the purposes of evaluating this idea of the digital good. And that may well mean doing some empirical research that you then go about kind of experimenting with evaluative methods yourself, or designing entirely new methodological repertoires for doing evaluation work. What we don't want to be is overly prescriptive in what we hope people will do with this funding opportunity. And sometimes, obviously, that can then make the scheme seem a little bit loose, right? So we're not offering lots of ideas about what you might do. We're hoping that you come with the ideas, and we're hoping to fund the best of them. The idea here, though, is not that we're getting you to do evaluation work of existing things. It might be that that's appropriate in one case, but it certainly won't be in all of the cases. It might be that you're thinking here about different modalities of evaluation, and we're keen to support you in thinking really broad brush about what this call is asking for. So no, this is not just a scheme to evaluate existing initiatives. This is a scheme for you to think about this idea of evaluation, unpack it, and get us further towards the idea of it. I hope that that makes sense. There's another question here as well. I'm kind of whipping through these. Helen, you feel free to jump in if you like, but I will just take this other one here, which is that the Research Fund invites proposal that, amongst other things, explores how to evaluate the digital good across different technologies, contexts, and domains. Does this mean that a proposal needs to span multiple contexts, or are you welcoming proposals that focus on the evaluation of impact of issues and impacts in a specific context? No, it does not mean that. Basically, what we're hoping to do is encourage a range of applications that cover a range of different contexts and domains. It may be that the study that you propose covers a couple of different contexts. What you will find if you look at the things that we have funded so far is that generally they tend to focus perhaps on one, maybe two contexts, but they're certainly not trying to do everything. And certainly, we're a £4 million investment by UCRI, ESRC, and we can't do everything. So we certainly wouldn't expect you to do everything between £20,000 and £50,000. It would be impossible. So focusing on one context can make a lot of sense. So we would advise you to have a look at some of the things that we've already started to fund, but again, with the caveat that we don't want that to be prescriptive. Just because we funded X, Y, and Z last time on those topic areas does not mean that we will fund A, B, and C on those topic areas this time around. We're really keen to see what comes in, and for you guys to use your imagination and be inventive and take what you can from the scope and the information we've provided, and come up and demonstrate what you understand that to mean, and put those applications in. Helen, did you want to add anything on that?
No, I think that's really helpful, and I think you're right to point folk towards what we're already funding. And most of those projects do look at a specific kind of application of technology. So there's one project that looks at remote health consulting in low resource Africa. So it looks at a couple of different geographical locations, but it's a very specific application of digital technology. And as Ros says, we are we are sort of a longer term investment, and it's kind of up to us to do the work of seeing whether we can abstract kind of general principles around evaluating the digital good from the diverse domains that will be the focus of the projects that we fund this time around. It's probably also worth throwing in there for info is that we need, as a digital good network, given the criteria that we need to meet, that our funder requires us to meet, we do need to take what's called a portfolio approach to our decision making about what we fund. So of course, research excellence and fit to the call and fit to the criteria are of the utmost importance. But if we receive 40 applications and the best 6 are about evaluating drones, we're not going to fund all of those 6 because we haven't got a very diverse portfolio if we do that. So we do look at the excellence and we do grade, but then we look at have we got a diverse portfolio in our final decision making about funding. It's really important to be transparent about that. So, you know, you may well submit a really excellent application, but that portfolio approach will be part of the decision making and is very much encouraged by our funders that we do it in that way. Okay, so there's a question there saying, could you please share a link to the 15-page document mentioned by Helen about assessment criteria for the impact of the project, or is it internal only? So Min, it's not only is it at the present internal only, it is incomplete. So this is something that we've been working on for some time. There are some gaps that we're in the process of filling. It is internal for now, but I really do see the value of making it more public. We had some fantastic meetings with our College of Experts before Christmas, and they asked those similar questions. How are you going to evaluate your own success? So it really is a priority for us to finalize and make this more publicly available. So expect us to do that in the coming months, but it's not quite ready for that yet.
I saw a question that I believe Ruth may have answered here from somebody asking, with the Digital Good Fellowships, whether you have to be employed by a UK university. And as Ruth has noted here, you do not. Not only do you not have to be employed by a UK university, you don't have to be employed by a university. And this is just something I wanted to emphasize, is that these fellowships are not just for people who work in universities, not just for academics. We are very, very keen indeed that at least some of these fellowships go to people who certainly are not working in those higher education contexts, who might be working in other sectors. So although the spirit of this question was, do you have to be working in a UK university, I suppose, could you be working in a university elsewhere? Yes, absolutely. And of course, we have the Global South ring fencing arrangement as well that you can read more about on the website. We also are keen to engage people who are not at universities at all. And I just wanted to emphasize that. I think it's a really important point.
Yes, brilliant. Thanks, Ros. And I'm going to kind of build on that and plug the fact that we are having a pre-submission sandpit/webinar, which is taking place on Tuesday, the 20th of February. So it isn't a sandpit in that if you are selected to attend, you are guaranteed funding, which is how the word sandpit is sometimes used. The intention is to help people to form teams. It's not a Q&A like this. It's if you've got an idea, but you haven't got a team, come to that sandpit/webinar, meet other people, talk to them, and see whether you can form a team there. We really, really, really encourage people that aren't based at universities to attend that event, because often early career researchers who we really want to bring into the network have not yet established those contacts with stakeholders in different sectors and are really keen and looking forward to connecting with others. So anyone that is here that is not at a university, please spread the word about that. Anyone that is here from a university but with great contacts from in different kind of stakeholder sectors, please spread the word about that. Please note that there is a deadline for applying to attend the sandpit, which is this coming Monday, the 5th of February. So there's just under a week to apply. The application process will take you 5 or 10 minutes. It doesn't take long, but because we cannot have 100 people in a 2-hour online meet people and talk to people event, we may have to be selective, and that's why we're having this kind of application process. So you can find information about the sandpit on digitalgood.net. Choose what's new, and it's the third event there, and hopefully there will also be a link to it in the chat from one of our brilliant team members there.
Yes, please do keep an eye on that chat. It's got a range of different links to events coming up and opportunities and various bits of information we've been talking about over this last hour. We have miraculously managed to make our way, I believe, through all of the questions, which we didn't think we'd be able to do, but we've just managed it in time, and that's fantastic. So if you do have any further questions now, can I suggest, first of all, that you wait for us to publish the frequently asked questions, the FAQ, that will kind of comprise a bunch of the questions that we've tried to answer today. And if you can't find your answer there, or if you cannot find your answer, and all the comprehensive information that's on our website, digitalgood.net, and if you go down to the Dropbox to opportunities and click on the different schemes, there's lots of information there. If you can't find information that way, then you can get in touch with us via email, and we're very keen to field your queries. And those are at info@digitalgood.net. So thank you all so much for attending today. If you want to kind of look back at this will go online as an aid memoir for folks who've already been here and for people who weren't able to attend to engage with some of these questions too. If you are thinking of applying for any of these schemes, thank you. We're really excited to receive your applications, and we want to wish you the very best of luck with that. So good luck, and we'll see you soon. Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.